Hello, and welcome to episode number 164, where I'm speaking with Amy Wheeler about experiencing joy. We talk about the difference between joy and happiness, how we cannot seek joy externally, and how nourishing our sattva energy can help us to experience more joyful moments. So please stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host, Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. I will also discuss topics like yoga, which is the sister science of Ayurveda, health and wellness, nutrition, fitness, and mindfulness practices, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to help you to connect to each other. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend that you start by listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. Now, if you like the content, please subscribe to the show so the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at the Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast, and it's a pleasure as always to welcome back our regular guest, Amy Wheeler. Amy, my dear, how are you doing today?
I feel very joyful to be here. Thank you for having me.
I love your choice of words. Joy is the topic we're going to discuss today. And actually, Amy, you chose this topic in our previous podcast episode that we recorded together. At the end of that episode, you suggested that we talk about joy. And this is a perfect subject because this episode is going to go live on Christmas Eve. So what a wonderful topic for over the holiday period. So I'm going to hand it over to you to start. And, maybe you could tell me, what is joy to you? What does joy mean to you?
Well, I think it's interesting because probably my definition of joy is very different than the common person. I think the common person would say, you're having a wonderful holiday meal with everyone in your family and everyone's singing and dancing and there's wine and people are joyful and sharing gifts. And I agree with all that. That is so joy filled. But what I really want to talk about today is when that is not available to us, or when, that's not our thing. Some of us are introverts and we're not into big family parties with lots of food and drink and dancing, that there is another definition of joy that we can tap into. And what I think is interesting about that second definition, which I'll share in a minute, is that it is available to all of us, no matter what our social status, no matter what our economics, no matter what our, class in society. Mm-hmm. And in fact, this type of joy that I'm going to talk about today is, I see that people who have less actually seem to have more of this type of joy than people who have so much abundance. And it's been really interesting throughout my career as a yoga therapist. I find that the people with the most money, the most abundance, are some of the most unhappy, miserable, lacking joy people that I find. And that was very confusing to me at first because I've never had a lot of money and I always assumed if I had more money, I'd have more joy. Right. But it's been just the opposite, that somehow a simple life where you're only using what you need and you're not, running all over the place on jet airplanes and trying to track down, adventure at every turn, and you're not having to take care of so much stuff. The more stuff you buy, the more you have to take care of that stuff. does not lead to joy. So that's kind of where I'm beginning, and I can give you the definition of joy, unless you just want to respond to that first.
No, please, go ahead.
So this definition of joy is from the Taittiriya Upanishad, and it says, where words fail to describe, where the mind and the senses are unable to comprehend, only through this is joy known. And I just want to break that down a little bit. First of all, it says where words fail to describe. So that tells me we're getting away from the labels. We're getting away from the shoulds. We're getting away from this tangible, materialistic world. We're going inward. We're really tapping into something deep inside ourselves that is close to formless and that we can't even maybe describe to another human being because the words fail us. Right? And then it says where the mind and the senses are unable to comprehend. So that part means this is very subtle. This is not a gross, tangible object like I got a brand new Gucci purse. This is that the mind and the senses are not able to comprehend. So it's so subtle that we're not even using our eyes and our ears and our mental projections about what's good and bad. It's so deep inside us that it's a very, very refined something in there that we can explore the mysteries and the awe of it. And then it says only through this feeling, this very subtle feeling that words cannot describe, is joy known. So what comes to mind when you hear that? Because it is mysterious. It is awe-filled. It is something you can't quite grab onto. You can only try to be with it and see if it will come to you, if you have a day where the joy will infiltrate you. But I don't think we can chase it or demand it. It's almost a very receptive thing, right?
I totally agree with you. And, going back to what you discussed at the start, that, the big celebrations and people might think that's joyful or, brings joy to them. But I think that's more happiness. And maybe we can discuss the difference between happiness and joy in a little while. But I feel like joy is our connection to our true nature, which is sattvic, that our true nature is sattvic and that joy is not something to be manufactured. It's actually in those moments when you're filled with appreciation for what's unfolding in front of you. And I do think that joy unfolds. It's not something we seek. It's not something we organize. It's not something we try to bring together, that it unfolds within us, because when we have those moments of like, wow, maybe it's a sunrise, maybe it's a baby's laugh, and maybe it's just a tender moment you have with somebody. It's almost like you're just brought into a sudden of a present moment, and you're feeling it from deep inside your soul. And so that's why I truly believe it's in those moments of complete awe, of complete joy, of this overwhelming sensation in your body, that you're connecting to that true nature of sattva. And unfortunately, in our modern world, we know we're pulled out of this sattvic state so much. But that's what I believe. It's just that glimpse of that sattvic state within us.
Absolutely. I had a beautiful yoga therapy session quite a long time ago with one of my clients, and they came into the session with the goal of basically having more joy, demanding it, make me a practice that will make me more joyful. And I spent the whole session saying, I can't make you joyful. I can't even design a practice that makes you joyful. But what I can help you with is organizing your life in a way that you'll be more likely for it to come to you. I can help you design a daily practice where you're in that receptive, awe-filled state in case joy decides to visit you. And that's the most we can do. Yeah. And by the way, when we get into that sattvic state through our daily practice or through lifestyle modification, it's just as likely that deep grief will visit us, or some trauma that we have repressed will emerge. So in that state, I even can't even then promise joy will come. There may be some other things that emerge in the wholeness of your being all at once.
Absolutely. And vice versa, the same. In moments of stress or moments of trauma, there can be joyful moments as well. Right?
I was just thinking that, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Colette, and I'm not sure I should say it right now, but I was married once before George for a very, very short time because the man that I had married, I didn't realize that he had been cheating on me. And about a few weeks into the marriage, I found out. And I remember standing at the door with my hand on the doorknob, and I had just been told what was really going on, and I realized that my life as I knew it was now shattered. And I had this moment of complete devastation of the life that had just been destroyed with the words that came out of his mouth. And simultaneously, I had this deep, deep feeling of joy and freedom that emerged. And I was so confused. I was like, what is happening right now that my life is gone. I had moved across the country from Chicago to California to try to make this relationship work. And, I had made a lot of sacrifice. And at the same time, I felt free. I was like, oh, thank you, God. And I still don't even understand that moment, honestly.
Right. It's so interesting that you bring this up now, because I was watching the Red Table Talk last night, which I love that show. Have you checked that out?
I haven't, no.
Jada Pinkett Smith and her mother, Gammy, and then her daughter, Willow. And so it's on Facebook Watch. I love it. Okay. It's so good. Right. So it's 3 generations sitting around at a red table, and they have all these different topics and discussions, and it's so open and refreshing. And yeah, you definitely have to check it out. So last night, the one I watched anyway, it's the most recent one, I think. It was on, I can't remember the title of it, but it was on love and what to do when relationships fail and so on. And they had a therapist on there. And this one woman came on and she shared that she had been with this man since she was 14, and I think she was in her 50s now. So they've been together for decades. And then just a few months ago, she found out that, he was cheating on her and he left. And so her whole world fell apart, and literally the rug was pulled from underneath her. Just a similar story to you. And the therapist was saying, feel that emotion, go into that emotion. I was giving her guidance. And then at the end of it all, the therapist was saying, but, there's something to come out of this because, we all make sacrifices in relationships and compromises, and, we want the relationship to work, but now you have your freedom. And now you have this, I can see that you're a strong woman, and you have now the opportunity in your 50s, because she was concerned of being single at that age and, how am I going to find another relationship and so on. But this therapist was saying to her, you have this opportunity now, this freedom to live a whole new life, to have a whole new adventure, and maybe discover some parts of yourself that, lay dormant because you're committed to this relationship and your family, and now your child is grown and so on. So yeah, so she was talking about how there is joy in this trauma of this breakup. Now it will take time to get to that point. And it's interesting that you had it at that moment.
Well, I had it at that moment, and then I had 18 months of just devastation. I'm not saying that grieving. It lasted, but yeah, there was one moment there that I think my soul knew that this relationship was not right for me, even though my logical mind had decided it was just fine and I should marry him. Right. My soul jumped for joy in that moment. Was like, oh, hell yes, we're out of here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And looking back now, it's so obvious. We were so different. He was an investment banker. He wasn't into, I don't even know if he believed in God, honestly. Right. It just it would have never worked. It wouldn't have ended well, So I think our deeper selves know.
That's what they said in the show last night. We
don't
always
listen.
know. One of the things that came up last night is like, you always know when there's something like our soul knows, but our mind doesn't want to listen. But we always have that little thing in the back of our head, like, yeah. But we're so determined to make it work. And so it's interesting that I had just watched that last night, and it was the same thing. Joy can exist in moments of trauma and moments of stress as well. And, you know, in these COVID times, right, when there's a lot of stress, that there can be moments where you find that absolute joy. And for me right now, it's, you know, it's definitely time in nature, but it's also time with my parents that I'm just, you know, when we're all hanging out and having a laugh, that it's like, wow, like these times are precious. Or, you know, my nieces and nephew, you know, my little niece Hazel, who's a bundle of joy, and, you know, just looking at her and everybody in the room just lights up. She is just the most joy-filled child, you know. It's just moments like that when there are times of stress or when things are not so easy.
Well, and I also think, at least for me, being a highly pitta woman, it's the times that life forces me to surrender. Like in that moment when my hand was on the door handle, I had no choice but to throw up my hands and my heart and my soul and be like, well, what the actual bleep? And I have to, sadly, I apparently need to be forced into surrender. And it's in that surrender that I think the joy enters. And that's why sometimes during traumatic experiences, I think it can come in because we finally let go and let God, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's the, you know, rebuilding process. I think after a terrible shock like that, you go through your grieving and then you go through that rebuilding process. And it's trying to find, I think as well, when you go through a trauma like that, it's like finding hope and joy in small moments.
Well, and what I remember about the rebuilding process is that I realized I had another shot at living my life in complete 100% integrity with who I am and what I want, and that I wouldn't have to compromise, and that basically I would find a partner that complemented the life of integrity I wanted to live, or maybe I wouldn't, and that would be okay too. But that opportunity to start living in truth instead of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole as I had been doing for 6 years.
Yeah. And now you found a wonderful
George
who's in alignment, totally in alignment with you.
Yeah. And we've been
beautiful.
together almost 20 now. So,
wow. Yeah. And talk about someone who's on your wavelength.
Oh my goodness!
Right?
Thank God the first one did what he did.
There you go. They're all learning moments. Moments. But what I want to get back to as well is what you were talking about earlier, that joy is so subtle that the senses can't comprehend it. And I think that's really interesting. And, you know, I was thinking about the difference between happiness and joy. And I do think that happiness really is external to us, and it's dependent on external factors, that things are going well, that, you know, your relationships, your job, everything's going well in life. And that happiness can come and go depending on how those external factors are playing out. And, you know, of course, the senses are scanning our environment. So that's giving us information from our external environment. So that kind of makes sense that happiness is external, but the joy unfolding within our senses are outwardly focused. And so it makes sense that the senses cannot comprehend joy because it's manufactured, or it's not even manufactured. That's the wrong word to use. It's already there. It's residing within us already. So it's got nothing to do with that communication from the external world through the senses to the brain. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And, you know, that's what I love about Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga. We have our first, you know, yamas, the social disciplines, the niyamas, the personal disciplines. And then we have asana, which is going to keep our body nice and strong and healthy. And pranayama, which is the mind cleaner, right? That's the mind and the senses get cleaned by pranayama or breathing exercises. And then number 5 is pratyahara, which is a result of pranayama, that the senses just start to go inward. When you clean the mind and the senses, your senses want to turn inward towards your soul, towards your Purusha. And so that fifth limb of pratyahara is necessary for joy to emerge. Because as you said, if the senses are going out and the mind is going out, we can have happiness and temporary, fulfillment of our senses, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the senses turned inward and found a new food. Pratyahara means opposite. Ahara means food. The senses have found a new food, and that is the subtle joy within. Absolutely. And then, of course, the last three limbs are dharana, which is concentration, dhyanam, which is kind of a, starting to really go deeper into meditation, and then samadhi, which is complete absorption.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you told the story of working with your client who was like, give me a practice that's going to make me joyful. And, you're saying, well, I can give you steps in life where it will bring you into a more sattvic place, and you may experience then more joy in moments, but I can't give you a practice that you're going to do for 45, 60 minutes and then you come out joyful at the end of it.
I cannot promise that. No.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'd be making big bucks.
I know. If I could somehow create that, I would be a multimillionaire right now. That'd be fantastic, and the world would be a more joyful place.
Right.
But it's interesting that we're laughing about this, because I actually do think yoga therapy has the potential to do this for all human beings on Earth. It's not the only way, obviously, but it has the potential. I mean, if we go back to the Taittiriya Upanishad, most yoga people these days know about something called the Panchamaya model, the five layers of the human system. And, those 5 layers are completely laid out in this Taittiriya Upanishad. And, in a little bit, I'd like to talk about the deepest layer, which is the Anandamaya layer. But before I get into that, I want to talk about why we can create practices that have the potential to bring people closer to their joy. And the idea that the Taittiriya Upanishad lays out is that if we can create a state of mind and body where we have a nice balance between structure and openness, then the prana will flow. And when the prana flows, the joy is more likely to come. So let's just break that down a little bit. We need to create a daily practice and even a lifestyle where there's a nice balance between structure and openness. Right? So let's think through that for a minute. For me, what that looks like is I've already gone through my 2021 calendar, and I pretty much know what I need to do every day because I work at a university, so I know what those days will look like, and I know when all of our yoga therapy school modules and classes are. So I went through last Sunday and I put in everything that I know I have this year, but I also put in, and so easy to do with electronic calendars, my morning practices, my afternoon practices, my evening walk, my have lunch with George. Like I put in those self-care practices, and I put them in a different color, right? So all the work is in, I think, orange, and all my self-care stuff is in pink. So when I look at my calendar, I see structure and openness, like, an hour of work. Wow, then I get an hour of, eating lunch with George. And it's really beautiful to kind of plan your year out that way if you have the ability to know what's going to happen this year, like I do, right, and really create a schedule for myself where prana is more likely to flow because I do have that structure and that openness.
Absolutely. And that's great. And it's a great way to structure, and the fact that you know your modules throughout the year. And even if somebody doesn't know their structure, their work structure throughout the year, even making a daily Dinacharya plan, which is essentially what we're talking about, the daily self-care practices, making a daily plan and having a daily routine of self-care. But I do think, looking like you're doing on an annual basis, I do think it's it's important for all of us to do an annual plan, even if we don't know what our work schedule is, but to schedule in, I would say, time off. That,
Right.
I know I have to work these days. I don't know what my work structure is going to be, but I know that on this week, in this month, I'm going to take some time off. So that's what I've done in, past years. It's like I'll put in every 12 weeks, I'll put in some time off to make sure. Now I may have to move that, but it's in the calendar that to remind myself you're due some time off.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say too. And I tried this. I wasn't very successful, that every quarter I would have a week off, and I put it in the calendar. Now, those things tend to get munched away when push comes to shove, but that to me tells me there's too much structure. I'm having too much on my plate and not enough openness. And because of that, prana will not flow and I will not experience joy. So you get really honest with yourself about how much you're taking on, and are you having that kind of grasping or FOMO? Oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, versus how do I want to show up to the things I've committed to? I want to show up sattvic. I want to show up with good prana, and the quality of what I'm providing from that state of sattva and prana flowing is going to be so much better than when I pack too many things in and show up all contracted and rigid and stressed out and no openness, right? So I personally have to remind myself all the time to do less, but show up sattvic and not try to just do more.
Right. And when you say openness, I think of joy as being that present moment awareness.
Right.
And that's something that we could certainly be more aware of during the holidays. Our holiday season is very different this year, and some people may be upset that it's not going to be able to do their usual traditions. But where can you keep yourself in the present moment awareness and find those treasures in a time that's, that we all have to hold back a little bit on our usual traditions?
Well, and I think that what you said is so key, that the openness is the ability to be in the present moment with what is here and now in a calm way where we're not thinking about the past or the future. Like that openness, that present moment awareness, you have to set yourself up for that. That doesn't just happen.
Yes. And that's what I'd like you to discuss now, because that comes with the daily structure of the daily self-care practices and all the other mindfulness that we do throughout the day. So maybe let's talk about that a little. And I know you wanted to touch on something else there. Oh, you wanted to?
Yeah, we'll come back to the Anandamaya. But so I'll give you an example from my life, because here I teach this stuff, but it just shows that most of us need an external reference point to help us manage it for ourselves. I've been having some back pain, and I've been feeling a little angry lately, and I just couldn't, no matter what practice I developed for myself, I couldn't figure out how to not feel angry and not have my back hurt. Yeah. And so I called up one of my old mentors from the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram and said, you know what, I want you to write practices for me. Right. I just need to be told what to do. And so I've been meeting with her on Skype, and the practice she gave me was like, do this little baby pose, and then sit down and take 12 breaths and feel. And then do this little baby pose, and then lie down for 12 breaths and feel. I mean, it was the slowest, most, I can't even describe it. I said, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. This is hard
how's
for
your
me to slow down.
How's your pitta feel about that?
So after the third time I did it, my back has not hurt. I have not had one anger flare. I'm completely happy, joyful, sattvic. And it's just because she basically asked me to come into the openness, to come into the present moment, to feel and breathe and be over and over and over. It's maybe a 45-minute practice. And I bet half of it is do the pose, then just sit here, and I can't write that kind of practice for myself, honestly.
Right. Right. Because you're thinking of the, what needs to be done, and you want to make the time you have for your self-care, you want to make it like maybe Pitta would say efficient.
Well, and I was going to strengthen that back up. My back is hurting. I'm sitting too much, so I better strengthen it,
Right.
And what she's having me do is just, it looks hilarious. It's like 2-inch movement, and then a rest. And sure enough, third practice, my back stopped hurting. So there you have it.
Exactly. And I think it's also important that these are continual practices. Now that practice may change, but that I think of, our sattva almost like it's already there within us, but it's also a well that we need to fill up every day because our busy lives, our stress, our pain, whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, that drains us and that drains that well. And we need to kind of like fill it up every day, and filling it up with, this sattvic life of living in tune with the circadian rhythm. So you're flowing with the energy, doing your daily Dinacharya, your self-care practices, eating well, spending time in nature. We talk about that a lot. These are things that will fill up that sattva well. And so that when you come to those moments of something amazing happening, unfolding in front of you, that you can come into that present moment awareness because your sattva well is nourished.
And that's so hard to do in modern society because we're not rewarded for that. We're not rewarded for slowing down, doing less, feeling more, taking breaks, taking naps, doing yoga nidras, going to bed early. We're not rewarded for that. That's a waste of time. And in fact, there was a time in my life where I would self-flagellate and say, "You're lazy. Why can't you work a 10-hour day?"
Right.
Now I've learned, even though I had this little relapse and had to go have someone tell me again, but in general, I have learned that letting down and letting go and relaxing is necessary for me to be efficient and on my game and showing up as the woman I want to show up as.
Absolutely, because otherwise we're just going to really run ourselves ragged. We really are draining ourselves of vitality as well. When we go beyond our natural means, that we're just, we're really going into a deficit.
And it can happen when you're not paying attention. I think you, as my friend, you probably watched me as the president of IOIT for those few years. My well just got empty by the end, and the inflammation went up, and the chronic pain went up, and my weight went up, and my mental kindness went down. And I call that a life lock. Like, we've made a decision, and then we're kind of stuck in that decision until we see it through. And I think the key is if we design a sattvic life, we won't overcommit like that. We'll learn from that experience and not do it a second or a third or a fourth time, right?
Right, exactly. And, I'm aware as well that there may be people listening to this who have, a busy family life, or they're in a job that, they can't change the pressure in the job. What I'm saying is there's external factors that cause stress that they know are draining their sattva. But I think, in that case, rather than going, "Oh, there's no hope," is thinking of where can I bring in the self-care? And for me, in working with various different clients, it's thinking about, well, the end of the day is usually a time when we have a little bit more control, unless you're working late into the evening or night shifts. But it's usually a time when children are in bed, or, you finish work at a certain time. And it's usually the end of the day when you have some time to yourself. And I think that's a great time to do these sattvic practices and to spend some time refilling yourself after a day of giving out your energy all day. And I do think it's important, if you're working in a job, like a corporate job or something, have that external cutoff. I remember working in corporate America, and, you get the side eye when you leave at the proper time, because there's always this, why are you leaving at 5:00? Well, yes, that's the time we're meant to finish, but, it's presumed you'll work overtime. So having that definite cutoff time at the end of each day, whether you work for yourself or you work in a corporate environment. Be very firm, no matter what's happening, of that cutoff time, unless it's a major deadline you have to meet in the next day. But try to be very clear about that cutoff time, so you have those evening hours to refill your well.
I completely agree. And so many people are working from home now too, or they're entrepreneurs. It's so easy. I have a 4:00 p.m. cutoff time because that's when my dog starts crying and wants to go out. And that's really good. I think having my dog tell me like, hey, you've been sitting there too long, we need to go, is a really good thing.
Yeah. The sunset is my cutoff time because right now sunset is around, like, I have to get down to the beach by 4:00. So that's perfect. And now I need to keep that up as we get into longer days, because, I want to catch the sunset at the beach. So yeah, by 3:45, I got to be out of here to make sure I get down to the beach before it's pitch black and I can't walk on the beach, So yeah, that's my cutoff time now. But I think we really have to be, firm with that.
Right. And, for the people who are in a life lock and it's just not happening. I've had that at my university job for almost 25 years, where you got to do what you got to do and there's no way around it. There are things we can do within that to make it more pleasant. I remember making my office have a water fountain and giving myself, at that time I got a Keurig coffee maker and tea maker, and I put beautiful things on the wall, and I made sure I had good speakers if I wanted to listen to music for 10 minutes between classes, and I made a little area where I could do yoga nidra. And there are things we can do when you're folding laundry for an hour at night. Can you listen to some amazing music or a podcast that you love that makes you laugh?
Absolutely. It's so funny. I had someone just email me today. They're doing my Daily Habits online course. And she was saying, I know there's Vata time between 2 and 6 p.m. and I should kind of be, managing my stress, but I'm working at that time. And I was like, okay, of course, we have to adjust to our lifestyle. So exactly like what you were saying, I suggested, depending on your office environment, she works in healthcare. Can you diffuse some calming essential oils? Can you put on some nice calm music in the background? In between each client, can you ground yourself? So how are those little moments during the day? They're available, whether it's just doing, 5 deep belly breaths, while you're doing the laundry, as you said, or while you're cooking dinner, how can you bring those calming moments into your day?
And how can we even rearrange our house? A couple of weeks ago, I decided I was going to put little altars in each room in my house. And, this is not like an official altar, but like, some beautiful flowers, silk flowers with a crystal next to it and a mala sitting there, just little things to remind me of the beauty in each moment. Yeah. When
you say that, it reminds me of sometimes I'll be sitting here working away, and I'm working and I'm studying at the moment. And so it's quite intense. And then I'll just pick up my phone and I'll search through my videos and look at videos of my nieces and nephews just for a moment. And they'll make me smile and they'll bring me away, into another world. And I do that quite frequently, actually, because I can't get to see them, so much now with COVID. But I just turn on a video, and in that moment I'm like, just lost in that little video, and then I go back to work. But that's my little moment of joy in the middle of my workday, when I feel like I just need a break and I need a little joy boost.
I have lots of kittens.
There you go. You see, absolutely. The kids and animals are just talk about wells of sattva. My goodness, they're just a joy, absolute joy. And, you mentioned a moment ago, Amy, reading inspiring books or listening to inspiring podcasts or something that makes you laugh. I do think as part of nourishing sattva so that we can experience joy is being mindful of who we're surrounding ourselves with, what we're listening to, what movies we're watching, making sure that they're inspirational, uplifting. I think that's really important to note as well.
100%. And it's hard to find. It's really hard to find. I saw on Facebook a few weeks ago, which I have if you're interested, a list of 100 inspiring spiritual movies. And I thought, I cut and copied that puppy down into my notes on my phone, because I was like, I'm so tired of these horrible media things that just scare the heck out of you every day.
Yeah,
it's
that's
too much.
Fab. Yeah, please share. That'd be great. I'd love to see that list, and I'll put it in the show notes as well if we can share it.
Good.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It's really important to have inspiration and to have that gratefulness practice as well. We talk about that a lot too, but have those moments of gratefulness in your day, whether it's when you start your day in the morning and you're still in bed and you don't have a whole lot of time, to do a lot of self-care. You could at least do 5 things that you're grateful for in the morning. That's a great way of boosting your sattva. And then being of service throughout your day whenever you can, showing compassion to people. I do believe, like little things, smiling at people, saying hello, opening a door, holding a door open. Those are little sattva boosters.
I do that all the time. I try to go through Facebook and see if I can add a little joy or a little comfort or a little support to people. Just emojis, comments, little private messages, and I feel good afterwards.
Exactly. I think we get as much out of it as the recipient. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So I do think that there's, lots of ways to nourish your sattva. It doesn't have to be this long, complicated self-care routine. Of course, it's important to take time to do meditation and yoga and mindfulness practices, especially pranayama, when you get time. And, we talk about the Dinacharya, which don't take up a lot of time and they can be dotted throughout your day. There's little pockets in your day when you can boost and nourish that sattva so that you can allow these moments of joy to unfold. And that's essentially what our goal is, right? Is to set up our day and our lives so that we're filling that sattva well, so that we can have those moments of connection to our true nature of sattva and joy.
And here's the hard part of our message today is that only I can do it for Amy, and only Colette can do it for Colette, and only you listening can do it for you. It's an inside job, inside of you, but also you deciding that this is the life I want. I need to restructure it. I need to start saying no to things. I need to let go of things that no longer serve me. I need a reset. I need to work with Colette or Amy on this. Right. And get some support, because clearly I can't do it. Just like when I went to my mentor at KYM, only we can structure this. It's not just going to happen miraculously for no reason. It takes effort.
Absolutely. And it's a great goal, for that new year coming up, and, taking time over the holidays to decide how you want 2021 to look, how you want to take charge of your health and well-being. And, I think that's a really, really good advice, Amy. And I will link to a couple of, podcast episodes where we covered about living in tune with the circadian rhythms. We covered about the Dinacharya, daily self-care practices. So that will be good places to start. Listen to those episodes, or re-listen to them if you need a reminder. Lots of information there on ways that you can nourish your sattva.
So can we just spend a couple of moments on the Anandamaya layer of the human system?
Please.
So many of you have read these passages from the Taittiriya Upanishads, and there's something called the bird model. And the bird model is basically saying that, for each of us, we have these 5 layers of the human system, which are like physical, breath, mental, life experience, wisdom, and then this Anandamaya, this joy, this bliss, this place inside of us that's very subtle and very close to our deeper self, or close to God, if you believe in God. And so that deepest layer, the Anandamaya bird, if you will, each bird outlined in this Taittiriya Upanishad has a right wing, a left wing, a head, a body, and a tail. And so for every one of these Panchamaya layers, the Taittiriya Upanishad tells us, well, if you're going to be in, the physical body, what does the right wing of the bird, the left wing of the bird, the head, the body, and the tail mean physically? And then what does it mean on the prana layer? What does it mean on the mental mano layer? What does it mean on the vijnanamaya, the life experience and wisdom layer? So I'm not going to go through all 5 birds and tails and heads and everything here, because that's a little much. But I do want to just revisit for this deepest layer of joy. The right wing of the bird is planning acts of enjoyment, just what we've been talking about, planning things that you can do to find that joy. The head of the bird is all about staying very close and setting your target towards that which is most precious to you, like your nieces and your nephews, right? And then the left wing of the bird is to remember times you had joy. So you going back and looking at those videos, that's remembering those joyful times. And the tail of the bird is basically believing in this joyful manifestation of creation, that it is possible for us to be lifted up and picked up by this creative life force that can get us closer to the joy. And then the middle of the bird, the core, the body of the bird, is where all of these acts of enjoyment, holding close to you that which is precious, remembering enjoyment, believing in this creative life force that gives you joy. When all of that comes together in your life, you will have joy, and that's the body of the bird, the ananda. But all of that takes effort. Right? We have to create a life that we are directed towards the things that are precious towards us, to us. We have to plan, like you going down to the beach at sunset every night. That's a commitment, right? You sitting there and remembering how precious your nieces and nephews are, that you do that, right? So this is just to say, these ancient teachings from thousands of years ago that tell us how to get closer to joy, they're right here, right now. It still works today.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And for anyone out there who's not familiar with the 5 sheaths or the 5 layers of the body, I did a separate podcast episode on that. So I'll link to that in the show notes also, so you can check that out, because I know you will be inspired by what Amy just shared with us. But it's so true, Amy. We have to put in the work. It's a process to get there. The work is healing and worthy.
Well, I'm just going to share a very brief story. In our yoga therapy training, we had probably 20 people in the room discussing this bird model and all the layers. And we got to the joy, the ananda bird, which is the deepest layer of our human system. And people started to cry and they started to weep. And they said, even as yoga teachers, even as Ayurvedic practitioners, we had forgotten how to build this into our lives. And, this is what we're supposed to be helping other people do. I think we forget about that and we don't do it for ourselves. So it's interesting to see a group of professionals that this is what they specialize in, and yet they are having trouble designing it into their own lives and need to be reminded. And you and I need to be reminded, right?
Absolutely. Because there is a lot of pressure put on everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur, a mom, a corporate worker, whatever it is, there's pressure built in, and there is a lot of competitiveness and so on. So we have to take responsibility for taking care of ourselves, and we have to really put in that self-care we always talk about should be a priority. So, I'd like to leave you with today is take some time over the holidays to think about the structures you want to put in place for 2021 and how you're going to put self-care at the top of the list before everyone else, because it was, you need to fill your own well up first before you can be there for others, including your children. And, how are you going to prioritize that cutoff at the end of the day, or those moments in your day when you can fill that sattvic well? And like Amy did, go through your calendar and fill it in. You may not be able to get down to the minutiae details for the year, but you can put in blocks of time where you can or even small periods of time, like 5-10 minutes here and there, where you can put in some mindfulness practices or take some time in nature or take some time with your children, whatever it is that brings you those sattvic moments.
Yeah. And just to remind us that sometimes you have a complete devastating event in your life that allows you a new chance to re-envision your life. And other times you have to do it a little bit at a time, and it might take a year to do the revamp.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, very important when you're going through those times of crisis or change or stress that you're not bypassing it. You have to feel that emotion. Otherwise, it's still residing in the body and in the tissues. So go through the grieving stages, and then you can still find moments of joy in those grieving stages. But know that's stages of grief that you're going through, and that eventually that process will come to an end.
Absolutely. And, I'm just sitting here thinking like, wow, some people might feel very overwhelmed with trying to create their joy right now.
Yeah.
So maybe you just plan a 5-minute joy break this afternoon, and that's where you start.
Right. Small steps. And like I said earlier, we're aware that people may be in positions where they don't have so much control over their schedule and so on, or have very little time. But you can find a few minutes to spend time with your dog or cat, or spend time in nature, or, to take those moments just for yourself. And we also have to be careful that we don't become martyrs. Do you know what I mean by that, Amy? That, you're just running yourself into the ground to kind of take care of everyone else. Be mindful of that too.
Been there, done that.
Right. We have to take a hard look at ourselves and see, am I draining my well, or am I having moments where I can fill my well?
Yeah.
Okay, Amy, we will leave it there. I'm wishing everybody a joyful holiday season. I know it's a very hard year, and it's not going to be the usual holiday fare, but try find those joyful moments, because we need those right now.
Thank you, Colette, for inviting me to talk about joy.
Always a pleasure. Such a great topic, and thank you for suggesting it. And Amy, I'm wishing you a very happy holiday season too, and I look forward to lots more chats in 2021.
I do too, and I'll send you that list of good shows that bring joy.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic, and I'll put them in the show notes for everybody.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
Amy,
you.
Thank you again. Take good care of yourself.
You too. Okay. Thanks, Colette.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Amy. If you think that this podcast episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them. And please check out the show notes for all the links mentioned in this episode. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do so, and the new episodes will automatically download for you. And you can also rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. I would truly appreciate it, and it would help me spreading this wisdom of Ayurveda. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy holiday season. Take good care of yourself, and slán go fóill. Bye for now.